Celtic overcome a potentially tricky early tie at Pittodrie. We'll be discussing that and all the transfer rumours on this week's episode of 20 Minute Tims. I'm your host Jamie. I'm joined by Stephen.
Hello.
And Melly.
Yes.
That was a potentially tricky tie for Celtic. The pitch was in terrible condition. It was never going to be a beauty contest with Barry Robson's Aberdeen, but we overcame it.
Yeah, it's a tricky fixture to go to, especially this early on in the season, but also this early on in Brendan Rodgers' reign. We've seen Ange Postecoglou got a big win up at Pittodrie after his fourth away game in the league, and it felt like Celtic needed to get a win that day. This one, if it had went 2-2, you'd probably thought, oh, do you know what, in the balance of play, that's all right. But Celtic managed to get a victory there when they weren't at their best. There was a lot of questions asked to Celtic. Aberdeen, to be fair to them, like Ross County actually went at Celtic, and they did put Celtic on the back foot for parts of it, but we came out with a win, and it's just ticked off one of those games early on, which is a nice one to tick off early on in the season, because it is going to be one of our big tests this season.
Oh yeah, big win. And I had misgivings about the performance itself, which we'll probably get into. It wasn't ideal. It wasn't the sparkling Celtic that we know and love. It was, I think we're still waiting for that sort of definitive I'm back baby performance from Brendan Rodgers, but it was a really important win to get, because for a wee while in the first half, with things not going particularly well, some selections, Hatate was on the bench again, so the midfield wasn't quite working. For a wee while in the first half, it felt like it might have the potential to be one of those quite sticky, quite stodgy Sunday afternoon games out of nowhere, aside from all the form and all that, out of nowhere, where it just doesn't quite click. It doesn't go well. When Aberdeen equalised, I thought, oh, here we go. We're going to see what Celtic are made of here. And in fairness, it was only, 4 minutes or something like that until they went back in front. And eventually a 3-1 is, by any standards, a fairly comfortable win in the end. But there were problems with the performance itself. I don't want to start us off on a downer here.
Yes.
I think it's very important to acknowledge that Celtic deserve huge credit for digging in, because it was challenging. Aberdeen were right up for it, pressed the life out of Celtic, and consistently. That's one of the most consistent, fairly aggressive presses I've seen domestically against Celtic for a good while. Pitch, as you've already said, was long. It was one of those sneaky ones, because normally when we complain about the pitch, it's because of what it looks like. So you look at it and think it's all patchy, there's like sand on it and all, and you think that pitch is a disgrace. But that looked fine. When the build-up was happening on Sky, you had to look at the pitch and thought, right, that looks like it's good conditions for the football today. But
you could tell with the players, they were struggling to get, even the Aberdeen players, they're running onto the ball and sort of getting caught under them a wee bit. But I think Brendan after the game described it as it was like playing a game on snow. It was Aberdeen's It was Aberdeen's first home game, so they obviously just left the pitch. They just let it grow.
Forgot.
They forgot. They forgot. They mixed it up. I know we're saying like Brendan Rodgers hasn't really kicked into action yet. We're not really getting this Celtic kicking into action. You wouldn't really expect it until he starts bringing in a few more players, a few more of his own players. But I don't want to do a disservice to some of the guys that have performed really well. Matt O'Reilly started the season brilliantly.
Yeah, he's been best player. Him and Kyogo have been the main men, haven't they? And kind of thought after last season, Matt O'Reilly, when he got the goals towards the end of the season, maybe this is the season where he kicks on, and there's that easy comparison to make with Brendan Rodgers, Stuart Armstrong, and you think similar type players. So I think he has taken this up to a new level this season. I think maybe that leadership in there, he's grown as a player, I feel, and I think he's underrated last season. I think we spoke about it last week about his numbers, but the game at the weekend there, he's shone above all the other midfielders at Celtic. And when Callum McGregor's one of the other midfielders and you're putting in a better performance than him, then it must be a good performance. So I think this could be his season. Early signs are really good, but if he can just kick on that bit, now that he's adding goals to his game, his all-round play is great.
Enjoy the last season of Matt O'Reilly at Celtic. Is that what we're saying?
We didn't want a downer.
No, I think he's going to be massive this season, regardless of what happens at the end of it. I think he's going to be a major player. I know it's early days, it's only a couple of games, but what we saw last season from Matt O'Reilly, as you already said, some good performances from him, especially when he filled in from Callum McGregor in that position, played a little bit in the Champions League there. Acquitted himself very well.
What game was it? He won sort of player of the... He won some sort of Champions League award in one of the games.
Was that against Real Madrid? Yeah, it was Real Madrid, wasn't it? I think so. Yeah, some sort of award.
Yeah, it wasn't man of the match, but it was along those lines.
Something along those lines. But you look at he had the highest assists in the league last season. He had created the most big chances going on the stats. So if you add goals to that, he's going to be a pretty unstoppable force, because last season that was the major complaint, wasn't it? He doesn't score enough goals. It took him close to 40 appearances last season to get to 2 goals.
Yeah,
and
I
now
think his first goal was January or February.
It was 35 or so. On his 35th appearance, he scored his first goal of last season, and then it took him a couple more games to get to 2. He's already done that so far this season in 2 appearances. So needless to say, that is an improvement. Numerically. That is definitely an uptick from last year.
It's
but
not
I think
an opinion, it's just counting.
Yes, exactly, yes it is. So I'm expecting big things from Matt O'Reilly because he's been here a long time now. He's seen changes. He's seen some of the teammates that come in around the same time as him come and go. He's still there. He's becoming more... He's still a young player relatively, but he's becoming a more sort of senior presence. The more players leave out from under him. Jota's gone, Starfelt's gone. So guys that he came around the same time, Juranovic is gone. So he's been promoted through the ranks of the Celtic team, and he's to all intents and purposes, his midfield, if Callum McGregor is going to be at the base of it again, he is definitely one of the first names on the team sheet ahead of him. I
mean, he's a great player, and he was speaking to Celtic TV after the game. He says Brendan sort of tweaked his role a wee bit, and the game's happening a wee bit in front of him. It's given him a chance to see more of the game, run onto the game, time his runs a wee bit better. But I think the main thing about Matt O'Reilly is he burst onto the scene and he was a brilliant player, and then he had a sort of sticky patch last season where, as Stephen said, he played at the base of midfield and he did well, and as the season went on you were kind of waiting for Matt O'Reilly to kick back into gear, and it could just be a case that Brendan Rodgers really spotted something in him and he's sort of thriving under this Brendan Rodgers environment.
Yeah, like the way Ange Postecoglou plays is kind of unique. I don't think we'll get many managers playing like that, so Brendan Rodgers maybe a wee bit more traditional with the way he plays his midfielders, and it does make it a wee bit easier for him. But with Ange, he'd often find himself sort of out wide on the touchline receiving the ball, but he's not seeming to do that. His runs into the box are a bit more calculated maybe this season, and maybe he's got a bit more free rein to do that. But I think when you watch him play, there's not much better than seeing him get on the ball, but the way he wins the ball back as well is exceptional. He's, for a guy that can do a bit of everything in there, you always think it's just going to be average, but he does it all pretty well. And if he's pushing on this season, his performances are up and his goal ratio is up, and we're going to kind of see a complete midfielder. And with Callum McGregor sitting deeper and Hatate's future's unclear, we really need somebody to step up in there, and I think this could be Matt O'Reilly's time.
How much time do you think Brendan Rodgers is going to need to get this moulded into the way he wants to play? And Melly said something that I've been thinking about as well. He's talking about how Ange played a very particular way, and it seems for the first time in what I can remember, there's so much focus on a new tactical style from an incoming Celtic manager. That is, we've been doing this podcast 8 seasons now, so how many managers have we seen come and go? There's been
5 or
something. I can't remember. Until Ange arrived, there's been very little discussion about tactically what's going to be different, but now everyone's like, right, let's look at this Brendan Rodgers team. How does it differ? What are the fullbacks doing? Look, Kyogo's doing something different. What's Matt O'Reilly doing? There's so much tactical focus on how Brendan's going to approach this game. I can foresee a situation where people getting a wee bit impatient, like, when are we going to see the real Brendan? When are we going to see it? And it will come. It will come with the signings and it will come with the transfers. But in the sort of short term, you're sort of to see this grassroots of it, aren't you? You're seeing the fullbacks are being asked to do something different. Kyogo's position and the way he plays has changed quite a lot. You discussed that in the Breakfast of Champions. And now Matt O'Reilly's role's changed a wee bit. And Callum McGregor's another one that we were discussing.
I suppose that this is why I'm being quite patient with the performances so far. The performances so far, it's only 2 games, but neither of them have been great. But that's not to make any lasting judgments about the direction of the club. This is a weekly podcast. We just talk about the games that have just happened and the news surrounding the club. So I'm being quite patient with it just now because, yes, it's quite unique. Brendan Rodgers coming in to a treble winning team from last season and just trying to tweak that from there. But that's not always necessarily how it works. It's not really just a case of, right, that team are really good, change nothing and just continue the way it goes. Otherwise, you wouldn't bring in Brendan Rodgers. You wouldn't pay him whatever he's been paid. I mean, presumably quite a bit. Loves a pound note, does Brendan Rodgers.
Look at that suit he's wearing.
Yes, exactly. So he's looking $1 million and he'll be paid significantly more than that over the course of a year. So I don't think it's just a case of, right, there's nothing worth changing, because a team like Celtic, we're always in some sort of flux. There's always players coming and going, so it will take a bit of time. There are some weaknesses in there that are starting to become apparent. The weaknesses that probably weren't there before because of
You better not be talking about David Turnbull again.
And
the shit we copped last week.
I know, the hate for David Turnbull. No, not necessarily.
Welcome aboard now.
Yeah, I know. It's weird how scoring a goal or two doesn't necessarily change everything you've ever learned about a player over the course of 3 years. But no, I'm not necessarily talking about Turnbull, but the slight changes in setup. I mean, it's nothing drastic, but there are slightly different changes. I was watching Callum McGregor and he struggled against Aberdeen. It was one of the worst games I've seen him have for quite a while. He's normally so reliable, and it's guys like him and guys like Greg Taylor who I've never even really considered, for 3 years now probably, I've never considered left back that much of a priority, that much of an issue, because Greg Taylor's been so reliable. But the things around these guys are changing quite a bit, and it will take time to get used to, because I look at Callum McGregor's role at the base of that midfield. He's had the two best seasons of his career under Ange, and that's over now. We've got a new manager, but you need to remember the circumstances of that were that the fullbacks inverted and formed a sort of almost like a separate three-man midfield with the midfielders in there, Callum McGregor in the centre of it. But that was with like Juranovic and Taylor playing out of his skin, and now Alistair Johnson, who's brilliant. Those have kind of been taken. The rug's been pulled away from Callum McGregor. Yeah, a wee bit. We're looking very open just now. But these are things that are going to get worked on. It's very early days. These are things that are going to get worked on, not only in terms of the personnel just now and just getting the beliefs of Brendan Rodgers, get that Ange stuff out your head and get Brendan Rodgers set up, fully installed. But in terms of personnel as well, the team's going to change. The team's going to change a lot, not only this summer, we hope, but in the next couple of windows. Brendan Rodgers has guaranteed that he's going to be here for the next 3 years. So a lot will change. We're only 2 games into this revolution.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how it's playing out now, because it seems like a team sort of caught between two tactical styles, and I'm just not quite sure about what we're doing yet, and I don't think the players aren't sure. I just don't think it's came off yet. And when you look at the players out in the pitch, apart from Nowotsky, it's a team built for Ange, isn't it? It's players like Greg Taylor, who was never really a Celtic player until he found this place in it. Same with Anthony Ralston. They all get built into this Ange team. Callum McGregor flourished when he got moved to that number 6 position when Scott Brown left. So this is all Ange, and the one player that stood out apart from O'Reilly and Kyogo was Nowotsky, because he was exceptional. I thought, being at the game, the amount of tackles he won, the way he brings it out, the way he can put his leg across and just take the ball away from players. I think when we get a couple more guys in like that are Brendan Rodgers players.
You think he was responsible for a goal though? I mean, could have done better, couldn't he have?
Yeah, those wee aspects of the game, but I think with Celtic right now, because we are in that transition, everybody looks a bit all over the place when we lose the ball, like Callum McGregor, like even it's affecting Cameron Carter-Vickers a bit. The thing with Nowotsky is that even though he's not been here a long time, you guys, probably nobody expected Cameron Carter-Vickers not to deal with that ball. So I can understand why people would think it would switch off, because he's been the most reliable centre-half I've seen at Celtic. He just doesn't deal with it. Again, we're forgetting that he's only played, a game and a half before this, so a wee bit of rust from him. But Nowotsky maybe should have been a wee bit sharper, but I think that one's more on Cameron Carter-Vickers. So I think we need a couple more players to come in, right, like Nowotsky, that we can sort of mould into a Brendan Rodgers team, because we're trying to reshape it, but we're reshaping it with the same type of players, and it's kind of square pegs and round holes with the full-backs and the wide players as well. I just don't think down the two flanks we've got it sorted yet.
Right, okay, I'm going to play a bit of dick advocate here, as we call it in this podcast, right? Because there's part of me sitting here listening, going, "Oh, this is all very well and good. You know, we're a team in transition. We're this, we're that. Are we though? I mean, take Nowotsky, right? We knew Starfelt was leaving. He was linked with clubs as early as February, right?
That's right.
So why are we now playing a centre half who's only played 1.5 games and he's still learning things and he's missed the warm weather training camp?
We've only had 2 games this season.
No, Melly, we've not. We had the full pre-season. We had some friendlies. And what? Well, there's not. The point is, they could have brought him in earlier, or they should have been working to bring these replacements in earlier, because you're sort of gambling just now, aren't you? You start the season in transition. Whereas, is there an option to start the season in less transition? Could we have got these players a wee bit in earlier? I mean, right now, we're all looking at this team, and me personally, I'm looking at it and it's screaming to me signings. It's screaming to me Brendan Rodgers type players. It's looking, you said square pegs and round holes. I'm looking at Greg Taylor thinking, I like Greg Taylor. We all like Greg Taylor on this podcast. He was brilliant last year. But if you're asking him to do something different, and he's no your guy, you need to get yourself a fullback. And we have got a very, very difficult start to the season. Now, this isn't negativity. This is me just putting forward an alternative point of view. We've got Aberdeen away. We've got Rangers. We've got Champions League games. We've got Kilmarnock. We've got difficult, tricky ties coming up. And we're sitting here going, well, a couple of weeks, this will all be pulled together. This will all be great. And I just wonder if there's more that could have been done to get players in quicker, more that could have been done to get this team a wee bit up to speed, particularly when you're looking at positions that you knew were going. I think this notion that Starfelt left because his partner, who was a women's team, I'm not saying her name out of a level of disrespect. I just think it's so cringe. It's big incel energy seeing people moan about this sort of thing on the internet, right? I think it probably happened the other way about. If it was related at all, because Starfelt's transfer was way more complicated, way more money, and probably took more time to plan, right? And he was being linked by Fabrizio Romano in February. So clubs wanted him in February. Celtic knew he was probably going in the summer. That's the model. We probably could have worked a wee bit harder to get a player in earlier. So I just wonder if we're sort of gambling here a wee bit. I just wonder if we're taking chances when we sort of needn't be taking chances, Stephen.
I do agree that ideally, we always say this, we want, I mean, well, it's not, in fairness, it's not just us. Managers always say they want signings in early, but as the point I've been trying to console myself with all summer is that these greater, the bigger ponds that we're trying to fish in now, the bigger markets that we're trying to shop in, probably just takes longer. Yeah, we could go out and probably get another several players from lesser leagues, from lesser teams, but people would probably complain about that as well. You get the stuff branded around about how more projects, FFS, across all the forums and all that. But what we're really looking for, if you were to put a name on it, we're looking for marquee signings, aren't we? That's what we're kind of looking for
not
at this
necessarily.
stage.
We are looking for a bit of that. We're looking for a bit of money to get spent. But what I'm really saying is, I'm not really talking about negative fan opinion. I'm not talking about projects. What I'm talking about here is Brendan Rodgers players. If Brendan Rodgers has assessed the team, and boy oh boy, he said he watched every Celtic game last year and he's well aware of the team and who can perform where and how they can perform, Brendan Rodgers knows Greg Taylor can't be the left back that he wants him to be, so we need to try and get one in early. Brendan Rodgers and the club knew that Starfelt was on the way out. We need to get these guys in a wee bit earlier. Now, we've won both games, and Rangers have it, right? So we're already sitting pretty the top league with a lead that could be, become crucial at the end of the season. All I'm doing is looking at this going, I do wonder if we're I do wonder if we need to be watching a team quite so in transition just now, if more could have been done behind the scenes to get guys in.
You'd like to think so. You'd like to think the club are doing everything, but at the same time,
we can't sit on a fans podcast and go, the club are doing everything, everything's fantastic.
No, of
course give us
not.
nothing to talk about.
And Peter Law's back, so it's all down to that as well, isn't it? But
the bogey man.
When you're looking at it, it's the most successful team that a manager's ever inherited at Celtic, so surgery wasn't required, but then Jota leaving, you think, we need to bring players in, and the injury to Tillio as well, and then a couple of wee injuries here and there. The squad maybe looks a wee bit thin, but it does take a wee bit longer. We all forget how Ange Postecoglou's team looked when he first came here. By this time, we hadn't signed Giakoumakis. I don't even know if we'd signed Juranovic. We hadn't signed Jota, Cameron Carter-Vickers, all guys that played near enough every single game or featured in every game that they were available for. So these things start to take shape, and it's always harder when a manager comes in his first season, because they are assessing a squad. Yes, you can watch all the games you want, but until you go out and say, I want you to play like this, and see these players in action, it's difficult to see, right, can he do that until maybe January? And while I said last week the transfer targets won't dramatically change, but Celtic have been gearing towards a system that Ange has been playing. Players can fit in, but now they need to change the way the fullbacks play, probably need to change the way the wingers play to get different players in. So we're having to look for that, and if we are trying to go up market a bit and shop for better players, because a lot of these players are very good players, but if we're wanting to push on in Europe, we need to try and find better than that, and there's no need to rush that right now.
I mean, Brendan Rodgers, if he was sitting here, would say, "Oh, you podcast nerd! What do you know? I'm
okay.
I'm winning football games here and building a squad. You need to give me a bit of time."
Yeah, and I think that he will get that. He will definitely deserve that. I mean, I was even, you're saying we should have get players in earlier, and I'm sitting here talking about 3 years from now. Don't worry, we'll be fine. We're fine in 2027 or so. It will get time, and as I say, it's not just, it's a combination of needing new players in plus just adjusting. I mean, you spin that back a few years, we never would have thought that Greg Taylor could have performed the role he did. He wasn't signed as that. He was signed as a pretty good, sort of fairly solidly defensive left back for Steve Clarke's team. He went into Neil Lennon's team. It took him a while to get going, but then he became like a revelation in this sort of inverting and very advanced guy, playing through balls, setting off attacks, playing in a sort of just off of a number 10 role at times. We'd never believe for a single second when he signed he could have become that. So maybe he can be sort of reverse engineered back into a left back. Right? Who knows? But it's going to take time to establish all of these things. It is. Again, I do feel like I'm making excuses, and I'm saying it's only 2 games in, but that is the reality of it. It took Ange a good while to get going.
Into January, February even.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've said it so many times, and it just becomes part of the history of that, or part of the sort of incredible story of that season. The first season under Ange is that they were terrible. At first, lost 3 of the first 6 games or whatever it was. So it will take a bit of time. I know Brendan Rodgers. I think if Brendan Rodgers had never managed Celtic, or in fact if Celtic had appointed an entirely new manager, we'd be a lot more understanding of it. But there is that sort of familiarity with Brendan Rodgers, who is here for a long time, and well, a relatively long time in management terms these days, and was very successful. I think there's a maybe even subconscious, it might not even be a conscious thing that we're doing. We might just sort of think, right, we'll do that again and hurry up about it, basically. And
I think with Rodgers as well, with the first stint of him, we were very patient in our play, but we were very good at it. With this, you haven't quite seen that yet. Celtic aren't holding on to the ball as much. We aren't recycling the play, as he says. It's a lot more direct than it was.
I think a lot of that's to do with the pitch. I think a lot of that was to do with the surface, particularly yesterday.
Yeah, and I think it's not quite get the players to maybe do what he's wanting to do. I don't see guys like ABADA, Maeda, those kind of players being able to retain possession. So he's adapting to what he's got in front of him. And I think once he gets the players in, but it's interesting to see how it's going to shape up, because you're looking at these players and there's a lot of players, even like Hatate, you can maybe look at Brendan Rodgers and see why he's not started him, because Hatate does give the ball away quite a lot, but he's always trying to make something happen. Yeah. And you can see if he's in that number 10, he needs to maybe work a bit harder, but can tell he's a quality player. So it's going to be, I think it will start to take shape soon, but I don't think it will start to take shape really until maybe December, January time. That's when you get the Champions League out the way, when things start to fall into place, when all these injuries and all that start to happen, because we're going to be, as soon as it comes back in September, it's going to be 2 games a week and it's just going to be ferocious. So settling in, like when Stephen was talking about with Ange, it wasn't really until that 3-0 game against Rangers we had, this team's arrived, this is probably our best team, and even then we brought in 4 players in January, and 3 of them went bang straight into the team.
Public service announcement. Attention all my bearded troops out there from stubble to mane. If you didn't already know, Manscaped now sells beard products. You heard that correctly. The leaders in below the waist grooming changed the game with their Beard Hedger Pro Kit. And now they're going a step further with their brand new Handyman, an electric face shaver for quick and convenient way to achieve a clean shaven look. Whether you're going to sharpen up your neckline or give your face a smooth finish, the Handyman has got you covered. Go to manscaped.com and use code TIMS for 20% off and free shipping. It's time to go from 5 o'clock shady. Yeah, baby.
No one likes a weird beard, so say goodbye to all your stubble trouble with Manscaped's Beard Hedger. The Beard Hedger is a high-tech piece of art in a travel-size package with a long-lasting battery, universal charging and a strong motor. Your face is your first impression and your beard is your most important accessory. So make sure you have the right tool for the job with the Beard Hedger. Looking for something, dare I say, smoother? Look no further than Manscaped's new Handyman Face Shaver.
Hey Stephen.
Yes, Jamie?
You've got a travel size package. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code TIMS at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com, and use the code TIMS. Hit the refresh button with Manscaped. The talk of this sort of period is signings. That's what everyone's talking about. That's what you think when you look at the team.
New toys, man.
I know everybody wants you, but you want new toys, but you're also looking at it going, could we improve on him? Could we? You're looking at the team now, and you're being quite ruthless in your thinking. You're like, I could probably, Joe Hart, I'm looking at you, Greg Taylor, okay, I'm looking at you, okay, we do a better run, and you're looking across. But some of the guys that have been brought in are good.
Yeah.
I was quite interested to see how they would pan out, because they were, I think Brendan might have called them club signings. I don't know if I'm attributing a false quote to him, but there was words to that effect, players that the club had been wanting all the time. But Holm looks good.
Yeah.
Yang, I think, might end up being the surprise package of the season, because he came, and I'm pretty safe in, I think, my thinking here, like, nobody really expected an awful lot from Yang, but every time he's come on, he's looked really enthusiastic, really dead keen to make an impression.
Yeah, and that can go one of two ways when you're a new attacking player. I remember Abada was a wee bit like that at first as well. It can go either you come in and you contribute, which you did, to set up a goal for Matt O'Reilly at the weekend, or it can look as if you're trying a wee bit too hard to impress, a wee bit too hard to get involved, look really aggressive and keen to get in amongst it, as it were. And yet, with that sometimes comes poor decision making. But I mean, look at what he's already contributed. And guys like him and Holm, who, this is why I tend to fight back a wee bit against that typical moan about how players are only projects and all that. And I know it's just that kind of silly thing that people throw around out there, but what I don't like about it is it tends to be a stick to beat the club with. Look at these projects coming in, we should be signing X for the Champions League and all that. These guys are in and playing well already. 2 games into the season, they've both played at least a part. Holm has anyway, and Yang has set up a goal. So these guys they're squad players already. They're not these things that we used to sign where we'll maybe hear from them in 3 years' time. If not, they go out and loan to Queen's Park or something like that. That's not what Celtic are doing here. But I think with Holm's form, he's looked excellent already. He looked pretty good in pre-season, as much as you can take from that. But I suppose we can now seal off the box. We can close the book on Aaron Moy. I think we can. There are players so far, I suppose, you could point to. Starfelt, we've kind of replaced, but we've not developed on, because it's just a like for like in there. A guy who's now the Cameron Carter-Vickers partner until proven otherwise. This Lagerbielke is apparently on the verge of signing, but we'll see what happens there. Jota, I think we can all agree, hasn't been even addressed.
No.
So that replacement hasn't come. But I do think that we'll see Holm now get very similar game time to what Aaron Moy was getting last season. Maybe not starting as many games, but he is quite young, quite a bit younger than Aaron Moy. I
mean, I think for me, that's almost the benchmark, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you come in as a signing, not as a young player, but if you come in as a signing and you don't play as many games or contribute as many minutes as Aaron Moy did, because it took him a while to get going.
Yeah, it did, yeah.
He had that period and then he sort of fell out of the team again due to injury. You could more or less say that's like the minimum now. Even though Aaron Moy did well for us, you're sort of going, if you see, somebody comes in and plays 6 times, you're like, or does 60, 90 minutes, you're like, did it really work out for you?
Well, guys like that, I mean, it's shared out amongst substitute appearances and starts, of course, but if a guy like Aaron Moy is going to play 42 games of a 60-game season for Celtic, that's kind of what we're looking for. I think Holm will probably hit including sub appearances, if he stays fit, maybe 50 or something like that if in his first season. I think he'll be involved quite a lot, to be honest. From what I've seen of him, of course it's difficult to get into this Celtic midfield, but ultimately it's not just that starting 3 that will play all the time, because if you look at last season, you had O'Reilly, Hatate, McGregor and Moy, and they all played at least 40 games each. It's all, the minutes are shared out. The starts are probably, of course, starting games is the most coveted thing by players, but there will be plenty of game time for a guy like that.
I enjoyed watching him play.
Yeah.
I think when you see
I think he enjoyed watching himself play as well.
Oh, aye, a few posts up there, edited ones as well. But I think when you see him, you think, oh, he's going to be a tidy player. But it was the dirty side of the game that I really liked about him. He was throwing himself about, a few tackles, some nice touches to take himself away from players, especially when it gets to that end part of the game where the game gets a bit frantic. But he just brought that sort of composure and brought that yardage, as Stephen says, where he took us up the pitch and broke away. So really impressed by Holm. Think we'll see a lot of him. But Yang as well, I think with him it's that enthusiasm. He just gets the ball and tries to take players on, and a lot of players when they come into a new team will just try and play it safe. He's not really caring about that. He done it last week against Ross County as well. I think Stephen might be sort of talking about that, where he takes the ball and tries to cut inside in a player, and he get the ball taken off him quite easily, but then he just went and tried it again. So I'm impressed by the way he just likes to take on players, because when we're looking at Celtic's 2 wide players, we don't really have that right now. They're 2 players that have their own skill set, but they're not guys that are willing to run at players, and their main thing's to try and take them on. So if he can do that, and magic feet for the goal as well. So it was good to see him getting the assist, and when you watch it from afar, he's right into the celebration as soon as he gets it. So he's got that sort of first assist. He's got something to really cling on to there and push on now, because if I'm looking at the 2 wide players, I think there's a space there for somebody to take.
But
I
look,
wasn't impressed with them again.
Just on this home thing, we need to address it. We don't do that here. Okay, that Instagram post was too Cantwell. That was right up TikTok Todd Street. You come on, you play 20 odd minutes. It was a good. You did a bit of skill. But that doesn't make the highlight reel. Okay, you just get the head down, and that's business as usual for you. That's what you do every week. You don't need that. Doesn't make the highlight reel.
Who do you think frantically phoned him or texted him?
Somebody did, because it came down or it got edited. I think
it did.
I think in my head I'm picturing Callum McGregor.
Right. Yeah.
Screenshotting it, going, "We don't do this here.
Yes.
We don't do that here."
I'm just imagining. Remember, Moy was accused of disgracing Jock Stein that time. He was sitting on his phone in the stands during the COVID season by Paul Lambert. Paul Lambert actually said
Moy
that. Yes. I thought we were going to say something about that. Moy El-Yunusi was accused of that.
Aaron Moy is what
I like to think that that very similar standards were applied there.
I'd like to think he didn't even have McGregor's number. He just got a WhatsApp phone number he'd not yet saved yet, and he's like, "Who's this?" And it's just Callum McGregor. Callum here. That comes down.
What I was going to say there about Yang is that I'm not comparing the two of them or their pedigrees at all, but Jota looked a bit like that in his first couple of games. I remember his debut was at home to Ross County or something like that.
Cristiano Ronaldo when he first joined Man U.
Wow. A couple of names yeah. But Jota, I remember his debut, he was all full of step overs and shooting wildly for all over the place, just dead keen to impress. And it's a pattern we see with these kind of younger attacking players. They're dead keen to make a mark, and he has done to an extent already. So that'll get ironed out. His decision making will get much better with experience. So yeah, I'm really encouraged by what I've seen from him so far.
The two of them impressed, but another thing is, look, Celtic were sort of down to the bare bones with Rio Hatate having to go back off, Stephen Welsh having to come on, but Brendan Rodgers had faith in these guys at Pittodrie, so you can go, well, club signings, but he had James Forrest there that he could have brought on. Yeah. He had guys like Iwata who have been at Celtic and a bit longer than the tooth than these guys, but he chose to put these guys on who have been brought in recently at one of the toughest away games, and two of them flourished and really got Celtic over the line in that game. Not even, I think the rest of the team was getting Celtic over the line. They pushed them beyond that and managed to get that third goal. So I think it really gave me something that, do you know what, while I'm still looking for signings, these guys I wasn't expecting too much of. I'm happy with them now.
What did they with LIEL ABADA? How do you solve that problem? Because his killer instinct for goal, he can sniff out goals, he's a threat in the box, but his final ball's not good enough. We just need to admit it. His
decision making's terrible
it's
as well.
So bad. It's this old thing we just not discovered, but we were talking about last season, how with time on the ball, when he has to make a decision, it falls flat. But when he reacts, he can stick it in the back of the net.
Yeah, and we were hoping to see a bit of improvement in his all-round game. I think towards the end of last season, he lost his place, and then when he did come back in, he was trying step overs, trying to take players on, but it just doesn't happen for him in that way. And I think with Brendan Rodgers coming in, we thought, right, maybe the comparison to Scott Sinclair, where he's that sort of inside forward and he's not having to go on the outside, but then he gets the goal. Fair enough, but it's from a set piece. Celtic didn't really create too much, but getting the goal for the set piece and then Kyogo's goals from mistake. And when you're looking for creativity, you're looking for that central midfield. I thought that was okay when Turnbull went off, but the wide players in both games I think have been disappointing. Now, Maeda's got an assist here, Abada got an assist last week and he's got a goal this week, but the rest of our all-round play isn't good enough for wide players, and Celtic will come unstuck if we get clogged up in the centre midfield and we're relying on these guys to create for us. So we need to be doing better out there. And when Abada gets the ball and cuts inside rather than lays it to Kyogo, that could be that moment in the game where if Celtic draw 2 each, you go, that was a glorious chance. Man. He cuts inside and just a weak left footed shot in at the keeper. When pass that to Kyogo and it's 99%, that's a goal. So it needs to be more ruthless, but his all-round play has to improve, and I'm still not sold on it. If he wasn't good enough last season, then having him in this season, and he's not really stepped up enough for me in the 2 games. This
is what I mean. As the games go on, Stephen, you start to look about everyone's position. You start to think the transfer window's still open. You start to go, God, we could actually improve on quite a lot of these guys.
I think there's quite a lot of work needing done. I think it's because when we won the treble last season, obviously that's an amazing achievement. But I think the next frontier was always going to be the Champions League. So I think a lot of the focus has gone on to that. And Brendan Rodgers even acknowledged that when he came into the club, was that the focus was going to be, or not so much the focus, but there's obviously an eye on the Champions League because that's where Celtic need to be much better. We've all heard the tedious stats about Celtic's last 20 years in Europe, having not won a knockout tie and all that kind of stuff. Qualified for the last 16 a couple of times yet, but overall Europe hasn't been good enough. So bringing Brendan Rodgers back brings with it certain expectations that we're going to push on to do that. And when you look at the squad now, yeah, it's absolutely brilliant domestically, but I think two things can be true at once. You can say that, look, this is a really good Celtic team, but is it good enough for the Champions League? Bearing in mind we're in transition, but the way they played against Aberdeen, is that going to be brutally exposed in the Champions League? We can't afford to go and play like that in the Champions League game because we'll be absolutely carved open. So again, I expect things will change hugely in the coming weeks, months, whatever. But I think it's all right to look at that, a performance like that, and think we need a lot of work done if we're going to not get embarrassed in the Champions League.
Does this make a mark in the Champions League thing? For me, I mean, it means everything to everybody, different things. People want to mean like leave the group. People want to see us just beat one big team. All I want to see for Celtic in the Champions League is a team that looks like it belongs there.
Yeah.
That's what you want. And
I thought you were going to say don't get pumped.
Well, that's kind of the same thing, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
It's a less crass way of saying that, yes, isn't it?
It's just thanks. You just want to see a team and players that look like they belong there. And right now you're sort of looking at this squad and you're going, and you don't want to turn the podcast into a downer every week. This is the second one, and I can already, my job here is to guide the podcast the way it's supposed to go. And I'm all like, well, we're back to this thing about he's not good enough. But that's what you get when it's a team in transition, and we're linked every week now with new players, and the transfer rumours are coming thick and fast. And the latest one was Ryan Fraser.
Oh yes,
from Newcastle. And that's the response that everyone gets when you're linked with him.
That was quite tame compared to some of the stuff you see online about the potential of signing Ryan Fraser. I mean,
he's fallen out with Eddie Howe
again.
I don't. He's fallen out. He's not the second manager or something. He's fallen out with.
Well, it was Eddie Howe that did he not bin him from Bournemouth after they?
Pretty sure he fell out with Steve Clarke as well
because of the COVID extension. He refused to play the games for Bournemouth because he was going to be a free transfer and he didn't want to get injured, so he didn't play, and Bournemouth went down that season, didn't they?
Oh wow!
Right, yeah.
Oh, that'll do it. then your ex-manager, then your ex-manager turns up. Would you take him?
Nah. Well, interest of balance here. Ryan Fraser is a good player. I think he is. I mean,
we don't need balance. It's fine.
He is a good player. I don't want to get caught up in it. Just completely dismissing it. It would be massively underwhelming if that was the guy. He
must be on what, 50, 60,
it'd be
70
more than that
grand
in
a week?
Newcastle. 70, I reckon, close to probably. It would be unavoidable though to lose Jota in the same window and bring Ryan Fraser in, and not for that to be the comparison made. You couldn't avoid that. Ryan Fraser is a good player, but we're quite a long way on from that season. He did an amazing season for Bournemouth where he and Callum Wilson broke records for setting each other up for goals. So the goals and assists combined between the two of them broke the Premier League record at the time. Bit on from that, to be honest, and his career has fallen off a cliff. He barely plays. He's not played any football for ages. Became a bit of a Scotland regular at one point, but really, I'd
looking
expect
for a lifeboat, and he's looking for rescue out of there, isn't he?
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Celtic have done that in the past. We've discussed that so many times. We were that for Scott Sinclair. We were that for Chris Sutton. We've been that for several players over the years, but it would be greatly underwhelming. I'm not interested in it at all. I don't, as much as I started this by saying in the interest of balance, personally I'm not interested in it. I just think it's worthy of discussion rather than just saying nah, pish, move on. I think it would be very unimaginative, very uninspiring to bring in Ryan Fraser for that. But look, I think he would be a decent player for Celtic. I don't think he'd be terrible because he knows the league, all that sort of stuff. He's been here before, but I have no interest in it for his age profile. The salary would probably command. Not interested.
Do better, can't we?
Aye. He might turn out to be good, but when you just hear the Ryan Fraser, Celtic, his age, you just think that's the potential to be a really poor signing that we could be potentially stuck with for a couple of seasons. And when guys like Sinclair and Sutton and all that, who we have rescued, as you say, they were younger than him coming in and all that.
I mean, even Burke. I mean, the Ryan Fraser thing sort of reminds me of that Burke signing as well.
I got a text saying that Ryan Fraser is the next Ollie Burke.
Did you get that? I can't, but wasn't it me that sent you that text?
No, it wasn't.
And see me picking out those names. I'm being charitable there. Those are the good ones. I mean, think of all the players that Celtic have picked up at that stage of their career and it hasn't worked out. I mean, most recently James McCarthy, disastrous signing. And if it wasn't for the fact that Celtic have been,
find him.
He's a personality hire.
If it wasn't for the fact that Celtic had been immensely successful in the couple of years he's been here, that would be getting talked about as the absolute catastrophic disaster of a signing. It is
a 5-year deal.
4-year
deal.
Don't over egg it, mate.
Yeah, 5-year deal would be ridiculous.
It was a nice, sensible, balanced 4-year deal. We gave him 13 appearances or whatever it is. So yeah, again, as much as I like throwing around those names a bit, remember we rescued Chris Sutton and Scott Sinclair. There've been countless. For every one of those two, there's probably 10 absolute nightmares we've had over the years.
Yeah, and you like to think Celtic are doing things in the right way, and it seems to be if they brought in Ryan Fraser, they'd kind of be binning a lot of that, wouldn't they? We're going for guys like Carter Vickers, Jota, or established guys like Kyogo and Starfelt, where they're just going to come in. With Ryan Fraser, you're like, right, okay, he's been available all summer, and we're getting him at this stage of the season. So it's just that bad feeling you get about a signing. But look, if he did come in, you'd give him the opportunity. He has been a decent player in the past, but it just doesn't feel that.
We need to stop being so charitable here. Nobody wants Ryan Fraser. Absolutely nobody. You wouldn't give him a minute if he arrived at Celtic. You just think this guy's not good enough, and it would be a terrible sign. It would be
I wouldn't say he's not good enough, because he's obviously played at a high level and he is still involved with the Newcastle squad. But he has been told to train with the B team, so they're wanting shot of him. But it just doesn't seem like one that. We wait all summer for signings, and he comes in. You wouldn't go, this is what we waited for.
He also doesn't fit the profile of the sort of players that we're linked at, because we're linked with some really esoteric signings, aren't we? Yeah. It's never obvious.
No,
we're linked with Lager Bielka.
Yes, another bloody project.
No, well, you're going to scout him because it's pretty much done. So you'll get the podcast coming out with Euro expert Alex. A scouting report coming
President
for him.
Boffin.
Transfer Euro Boffin,
yeah.
Alex. He's a centre half, so that's obviously a position we're looking at. We're looking at Goodmanson from LIEL and Quentin Mellon, what a tremendous name that is, to left full back. So that's obviously a position we're looking at, and we're obviously looking at wingers. And I think we all know by now that we pretty much want another goalkeeper. Or we're probably going to lose Siegrist, probably lose Joe Hart, and we need to get a goalkeeper in. We've only got a couple of weeks to do it though.
Yeah. 3 players in that time, but as we talked about earlier, Giacomakis, Carter Vickers, Jota come in on deadline day, so it is difficult in your first transfer window as a manager trying to get everything in check. But this is when players maybe start to become available, or players' options dwindle down, because if we're being realistic here, Celtic aren't going to be the main option for many players wanting to get to the top level. They'll be looking at the top 5 leagues first, won't they? And they'll be trying to get there first. And then if that fails, they maybe see Celtic and go, you know what, maybe if I go there for a season or 2, I can get the move then. So players will be biding their time. There's a lot of money involved now as well. Well, Celtic can maybe afford to go out and get a £9 million player. A £9 million player even 3-4 years ago, the wages that come with that is just went up dramatically.
Look, we're pretty good at what we do. We can go out and spend £6 million.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And Celtic. We can go out and spend £6 million and get a Jota. We can go out and spend £6 million and get a Cameron Carter Vickers. $5.5 million gets you Starfelt and Narovsky. If you wanted though to pull off a rescue mission, right?
Oh, he's going to drop a name for us?
Yeah, Kieran Tierney.
Oh, right.
My heart would burst.
We want a fullback. He is clearly not in Arteta's plans. Eddie Howe's sniffing around him. He wants to take him to take him to Newcastle. Obviously, the chat is that he wants to take him on loan, but Arsenal are not really interested in loaning him to a rival. That would be a really peculiar thing to do, because Arsenal and Newcastle, you would anticipate, were both fighting out for similar positions in the Premier League next year. Yeah. It would be incredibly unusual for them to loan out a fullback to Newcastle, in my opinion. So he's going to need a club somewhere. Would you take him, Stephen?
Had his chance, mate. No, if there's any chance of that whatsoever, you do it.
Stephen, go get the megaphone.
Megaphone shagging coward that he is. No, if there's any chance of that happening, just do it. Worry about everything else later, to be honest. Kieran Tierney is a magnificent footballer. Yes, it hasn't. Well, I mean, I was going to say it hasn't quite worked out for him, but his first couple of seasons at Arsenal were great. Won a couple of trophies, I think. Won the FA Cup as well. So it has been good.
Love him.
Yeah, but it's one of those. I mean, I suppose there might be an Arsenal podcast somewhere, not as good as us, but talking along similar lines,
Arsenal
talking about
TV, mate.
Yeah, Arsenal fan,
of
Arsenal fans
course.
TV, of course, right? Not as good as us, as I said, but
Is that the one where they all shout at each other?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, and they all do very, very performative, like standing up and kicking over chairs and all that sort of stuff. We'll get desperate enough for that at one point. Definitely. So, but these your fans might be talking along the same terms as us. So you might take a Kieran Tierney, much like the same way we are talking about an ABADA or David Turnbull. There's nothing wrong with these players, but it's a constant progression. They might have just arrived at a point where, yes, Kieran Tierney did a great job, but is there something else? If we want to win the league next year, came close last year, but we didn't quite make it. If we want to win the league next year, do we need better players in X, Y, Z position? This is exactly what we're doing. We're saying, yes, these guys have done a good job, but we kind of need to progress from there. So it might just have arrived at that point for Kieran Tierney.
Sorry.
But just to put a button on that, it's still a tremendous player. It would be.
He just walks right in this team, doesn't he?
Of course, and improves it significantly. Yeah, Greg Taylor's done a great job. We've been huge fans of him here. Bernabe, who knows at this point. I think today, as we record this, he has finally been done for drink driving or something. But he's had a few problems, but I think they're all just sort of under the bridge now. It's just sort of water under the bridge. Brendan Rodgers spoke about that. His punishment for sleeping in was just a punishment for that. It's not like being sort of spread out to get him out of my club, never darken our door again. It was just
one and done.
Yeah, it was a punishment for a indiscretion at the time. So I think he'll be welcomed back in. But is it going to work out for him, Bernabe? I just don't know. That's a year now. He doesn't seem to have progressed any further when it comes to establishing himself in any way. So a long way around to say bring Kieran Tierney in post haste.
Well, the thing is, Melly, Kieran Tierney is one of these players. If you can get him, you go get him.
Yeah.
And if he arrives at the club and you are second choice left back, or you're currently first choice left back in Greg Taylor, sorry, kid. Yeah, I mean, sorry, Bernabe. We'll find you alone, but this guy is now automatic first pick.
Yeah, like Stephen said, I think the Arsenal, Mikel Arteta coming in and playing similar to Guardiola, just moved the left back position beyond Kieran Tierney, and just he's an old school fullback now that just bombs on. And I've seen Zinchenko in the flesh twice, where Scotland v Ukraine and Ukraine, Sweden at the Euros. Best player, one of the best players I've ever seen in the flesh. Just dictated the game, absolutely brilliant. So there's no shame in taking the place taken by him. And even like Timber played at left back at the weekend ahead of him, and he's right footed, I think. So Kieran Tierney's been bombed out there. I'd love him back. My heart would burst. I think it would be glorious. But when you're looking at it from Celtic and Arsenal's point of view, for Arsenal, it makes absolutely no sense. Would they not be better keeping Kieran Tierney rather than Celtic paying 30 grand of their wages at most, and he's still got 3/4 of his wages still to pay, whereas Arsenal, that Timber's just been injured. It's another player they could they'd rather sell him, but I don't know if there's many teams that can afford to buy him. So does it benefit them sending him to Celtic? Because what happens at the end of this season? Celtic aren't going to buy him. Celtic aren't going to afford their wages. So
we never know. Sometimes when it comes down to players, there's that personal connection, though. And like you say, if Celtic can't afford him, Arsenal, nobody wants to buy him, and he goes to Arteta and goes, look, if there's an option of making this Celtic thing work, I'd really like to explore it. Then the ball's
it's up to you, Kieran. Are you ready to take 1/4 of your wages?
Well, it's up to Celtic. Suppose Celtic can pay big wages, but Celtic are paying more money now than they were when Kieran left. And I'm not saying we can match what Kieran's on, but if Kieran Tierney, there was maybe no option of Kieran Tierney getting 40 grand a week at Celtic when he left. Now it's maybe an option, and that's half of what he's getting just now.
He's on 100 grand,
or a third of what he's getting now. Look, the money can always be sorted out, but especially when it comes to a loan. But I just think if the option's there to go and get Kieran Tierney, you just go and get him, and you don't want too much winding the clock back, do you? But it kind of doesn't apply in this scenario.
He's at a good age as well.
Just imagine this. The money can always be sorted out. Celtic getting into crypto and all that kind of stuff. Doing these investment courses. Investment courses these charlatans sell on TikTok and all that, just to get a bit of money behind us for Kieran Tierney.
Don't worry, Kieran's like, the money didn't land last. We're sorting it. We're sorting it. Get some Ponzi scheme.
Michael Nicholson just trying to seal the deal, and he's got Peter Law locked in a cupboard somewhere to stop this happening.
And on that bombshell, we will wrap up this episode of 20 Minute Tims. Thank you so much for watching. If you watched us on YouTube, please subscribe. Half the people that watch haven't subscribed yet, and it doesn't cost you a bean. We'll be back next week.